Welcome, Aliesha Embleton, to Coaching in Session. How are you doing today?
Well, thank you, Michael. How about yourself?
Doing good. Just got a lot of work done, so I'm excited for the upcoming days because that means I'm on track. And the work that you do is going to be helping children be on track because you are a child development coach. You help with the aspects of the fundamental, the foundation of helping children become the true people they can be. There's a lot of, I guess you could say, mist in the world, and it's very foggy for the future of our children because we can look at technology, society. There's a lot of hiccups and a lot of roadblocks, but we do have to get into the realm of the true nature of what children need in order to develop properly. In your own words, can you tell the world who you are, what you do, and how you help?
Of course. And a lot of that is something that you've even just sort of touched on there. So I am a child development coach. I work with parents and children to look to develop these fundamental skills that we really need to bring back to these kids. You know, what we're seeing in all of the research is that we're noticing these increasing figures around anxiety, depression, various mental health challenges. And all of these sort of stem back to things like a lower levels of resilience. They stem back to things like the pressures of social media, for example, and how that impacts on their authenticity. All of these sort of things stem back to what I sort of focus around being three particular fundamentals. We need to develop resiliency, we need to develop authenticity, and the third one, which is what I call entrepreneurial spirit, it's very much a mindset sort of pillar. So it's around things like the growth mindset. You know, how can we perceive failure in a more productive way? How can we see that as a journey of learning instead of a failing and having done something wrong? You know, it's all around that creativity and that innovation and being able to sort of spark those interests in our children. I very much see that there are these three areas that that's the areas that I work with parents and children to help them. That's the areas that I have included in my book and that you can find out a little bit more about in there. I provide a whole heap of information around those pillars. But yeah, I think a lot of the areas that, you know, I, as a child development coach, as an author, those are sort of the particular focus points that I work with both the children and the parents, because it is both. You know, we need to develop these skills in the kids. We need to give them that opportunity to learn and to grow. You know, the sooner that we can instill these fundamentals in the kids, the faster it is that they're learning and practicing these so that by the time they reach adolescence, by the time they reach adulthood, these are well ingrained skills and that these kids are off and running. You know, I work with the children to help them, but then it's also working with the parents to be able to help them create that environment and be able to understand how they can support their kids. I'm a stepmom to two teenagers. As a parent, we all want the absolute best for our children. That's what I'm really working with the parents on is how can we work together to create that amazing future for their kids?
Mhm. We have our three fundamental pillars, but what would be maybe three obstacles that we can be looking at too? Because I'm sure that's a common question that you get. Because we can look at what's going to help build us up, but we also have to be careful about what can tear us down.
Exactly. And that's very true. We need to be very conscious of what are those challenges? What are those triggers? What are those things that are in our life that might impact being able to really fulfill these sorts of three key areas? So for resilience, one of the big key things that we see here are stress levels and the anxiety that comes from that. A lot of kids are actually experiencing higher levels of stress and anxiety and depression than what has been historically. In Australia, in the last 15 years, we've seen a doubling of the stats of the kids that are experiencing these issues. That's utterly terrifying. And I know that the rates that we're currently seeing in Australia are actually quite similar to what's being seen in the US as well, looking at some of the stats over there. We need to be able to develop resiliency so that they can understand the difference, for example, between good stress and bad stress, because there are such things as good stress. Being able to develop these understandings and this awareness in our children. For authenticity, one of the big challenges is they start to see a lot of perfectionism happening in the world. So if we think of social media just as one example of this, does anyone put their, I'm just waking up and getting out of bed and, the horrible hair and does anyone put those photos on social media where they're not looking their best? No. And so what kids are seeing is that there is this perfect life that's happening. They're only seeing the good times. They're only seeing the really well put together images. They're only seeing this perfection. And so for kids, that's a big thing because they then start putting that expectation on, well, I can't be anything but. They then actually start having, and then it kind of fuels back into the anxiety and the resilience challenges, because then they start kind of getting into this little spiral there. For authenticity, it's about having that deep self-trust so that they can actually understand that all of them is fantastic. Welcome the good and the bad and all of it. And then for entrepreneurial spirit, I think the big element here that can be a challenge is around the perception of failure. And again, it kind of stems back into some of those other elements around the perfectionism that we're seeing, but it's even more than that. With the perception of failure, kids are thinking that they have to get the perfect score on the test. They have to be able to learn something new and be good at it straight away. And, they pick up a new musical instrument and they assume that they have to be able to do a certain level of that. Or they start to play a new sport as an extracurricular activity at school, or after school activities. And they have this expectation that they need to have already mastered this skill. And they forget that there is this amazing learning journey of development that actually happens long before mastery. And that really, for the most part, we spend the entire life going on this incredible journey of continually up leveling. And to be able to do that, we need to fail, because that is our guidepost around, okay, well, what did I learn? And then how can I do better? So if we want to up level, if we want to keep excelling, we need to be able to actually see failure as that amazing indicator light for us and that learning opportunity that it is.
How has childhood development changed from when we were younger? Because it is easy, I believe, for parents to look at their experience in schools and things along those lines, make some adjustments. But how we learned when we were younger is not how they're learning when, in our current age and time. Think of technology, what's happening in the world. There's different scenarios and situations that we can't just say, well, in my day, we did this. We had to walk 50 miles to school, and today you get an Uber to school.
Yeah.
We have different situations, but yet parents have a hard time or a difficult time understanding that times are going to be changing and we move with the times. Think of like our technology, our cars. We don't have old cars anymore. We have new cars. It's, push to start and we are cruising. We have our cell phones, right? We have these houses that have all of these luxurious things, Alexas and the Google nodes. I don't even know what they're called, but we have a lot of technology in our world today. It's different now because the peer acceptance that you talked about, the perfectionism, the fear of failure, that's linked to social media. So now they have things that we never had. How can we start to look at the differences between then and now?
A lot that I could go into for that one. There are so many things. I think the one area that I find has the biggest impact, that once we can really bring this back to the kids, it switches things. Like, this is probably for me, one of the biggest things that I work with parents and kids in changing is simple activities. What I mean by this is that children are growing up in a technologically focused world. They on technology, not quite from the moment they wake up, but pretty close to. And then they're on whichever device for school all day. They come home, they need to do their homework on technology, their social engagements. It might be gaming, it might be various different social media platforms, but social engagements are on technology. Everything, there's such a huge focus of technology. And don't get me wrong, technology has its amazing benefits. But what has changed from when you and I were young to what the kids are growing up with now is that we used to have that time where our brain could actually have that processing and to be able to spark these creative ideas, to be able to have that innovative thinking because we had that time doing simple activities. It might be reading a book, it might be playing outside, it might be doing a puzzle. There are a range of things that could be, but it's that time away from the device. There is a lot of research that actually shows there is quite a negative impact that is happening on the brain development of our children because of this heavy linkage to technology. And this starts from when they're really, really young. Children are not learning in the same way that we did. They're not learning the same depth of how to self-soothe. They get given a phone, they get given an iPad, and they learn to distract rather than to soothe. It's being able to understand the steamroll of what has actually happened with this massive change in how these kids are growing up. There's a big snowball that actually flows out from that. Like I said, technology is fantastic. It has opened so many doors and is wonderful, but we need to balance that. Our brains actually need time away from technology. Our nervous system needs us to learn how to process the emotions, to be able to soothe ourselves, not to just distract because we've got Netflix there, because we've got, this particular thing that can distract us. So I think that's probably one of the biggest changes that we're seeing through the research and through the work that I do with kids, that the moment that we can actually bring back some of those elements that we had as kids that were just natural for us, it wasn't a thing. But the moment that we can bring back some of these, it makes huge differences.
There's multiple schools of thought here when it comes to technology and like the old school way of education. Some parents think that they don't want to take away technology from their children because their children are going to be behind in the times. Think of grandma and grandpa on their smartphones. They don't even know how to text, maybe. It takes a little bit of time and effort for them to get that text through, but they get it, right? They learn. It takes a little bit more time. Yeah,
They
if you
hand it
tell a
to the 2-year-old to
4-year-old to
learn.
do, yeah, if you tell a 4-year-old to do a text, they're like doing this, they're doing the send late thing, like the invisible ink on the iPhones. They know it all.
And there are so many 4-year-olds who then change the grandparents' settings on them and they don't know how to change it back.
It's almost similar to that situation where that older gentleman went to court and he was a cat. I don't know if you remember that video. Like it was a Zoom call. This is
No.
probably during the pandemic where he had a call into the court, I believe, for something. And I guess one of his grandkids had used the Zoom and there was a filter of him being a cat. So he's a cat and the judge is like not happy about it. He's like, you need to take your filter off. And he's like, Judge, I don't know what to do because my grandkid was doing something and now I'm a cat. So, and then like he even went as far to say, like, I assure you, I am not a cat. But technology is changing. So they can do things that we might not know, vice versa. And I remember even when I was a teacher, they would do things on the computer where they were like shift the windows like sideways and upside down and stuff like that. And they're like, oh, my computer's broken. I can't do any work. I'll go over there and fix it real quick for them. They are
They're creative.
extremely intelligent with that. But we do have to look at, can we take that away from them? Can we take that a beacon of what technology is to make life easier and give them the aspect of the old school life, right? Writing your bike until the lights came on, the street lights came on, getting bit by mosquitoes, everyone going to the playground and not staying inside the house. Like that way of living has almost dissipated to a certain level to, I would say, maybe 80% negative. So now 20% of kids are doing what the old school parents did, going out, having fun, interacting, not being in front of technology. But that's probably because of the parents. They have rules. Screen time is going to be limited to this amount. I know for my kid, it's more of let's go out, let's play with water, let's go play with dirt, let's go play with rocks, let's do stuff. But then at the same time, I'm extremely busy. So I'm trying to do the old school type of parenting, but I'm living in a modern world of having to, virtual appointments, meeting with people. It could be a lot. So some parents are going to say, you know what, here's that iPad, here's that thing, as a way of saying, I need to provide for us. And now I understand you're not going to have an opportunity to self-regulate or to experience the world for the old school way of being, but I just need to get by. How can we start to give hope to parents that there is a way that we can have our children develop properly and not in the hands of technology all day, 8 hours in front of a TV or a screen, where the Pepper Pig is, like helping them understand, muddy puddles and stuff.
And it's a big challenge that all of us as parents face, right? They all want to be on the devices all the time. So how do we balance that? And as you say, we're all trying to work as well. There's element that we're also putting on the seesaw and trying to balance all of these things. And there are so many things that we're trying to juggle. And I think what we need to remember as parents is that it's not about removing technology altogether, because that's not the world that we live in now. It's about embracing technology in a balanced way. If we think of food as an analogy here, we have all heard that everything in moderation, you can have that little treat, you can have this, you could have that, but everything in moderation. It's the same principles. So it's about being able to not take away all of the technology. It's about looking at how can we add in the time that is going to create the balance that we actually need. And so that it might be towards the end of the day as a family, we all sit down, we play a board game or a card game or something. It might be that we do a puzzle together. It might be that instead of coming home and immediately starting homework, maybe there's 20 minutes of just reading a book. It's about finding little things that we can inject into the daily routine and the daily life to be able to create that balance. It could be looking at drawing on the use of technology for some of the mindfulness apps and various different sort of support that we can be able to teach kids mindfulness through that technology. I think there is a lot that we can do, that it's really not so much taking away, it's how can we add more to be able to create a better balance and to be able to help support that development. So it's bringing that consciousness and awareness to, what does a daily routine look like? Is there 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 20 minutes in that day that we could actually implement just one change? It doesn't have to be a total overhaul. We don't have to have them out there for 5 hours in the afternoon outside, riding the bike, being at the playground. Hey, if we can do that, fantastic. Don't get me wrong. But it doesn't have to be that extreme. Little things, lots and lots of little steps is going to take us on a massive journey in the long run. And so we just need to remember it's the little things that we can tweak and change that will have the biggest impact.
I was thinking when you use the analogy for like food and like eating healthy, people have sweet tooth. Like I'm sure you heard of that saying, like, oh, I have a sweet tooth. You never hear anyone say, I have a healthy tooth. like I have a green
Other
tooth.
than the
Like
dentist.
that's probably a problem if you have that. We look at the negative more. Naturally, our brain is attracted to the negative, where we might not even know it's happening. We're eating all of these sugars, all of these things that are not beneficial for us. And then we find ourselves maybe overweight. Maybe we, are not able to do the things that we once loved. So now we can start to feel depressed, and we can go into that whole stress and anxiety that we're feeling now because we are not living the life that naturally we would like to be living. Most kids want to be free and run around and jump on stuff. Yet parents say, don't jump inside the house, don't do this, you're going to break that. When you go to school, you have to sit at a desk for 6 to 8 hours a day, and you can only get up, walk in line, raise your hand if you have to use the bathroom. It is very regimented to the sense of now we're training them to not be true to their nature. Is the fundamental pillars helping them understand their nature and to get back to that original setting that they were always aligned in, that they got off kilter because of technology, parents, the school system, whatever?
Yeah, it very much is. And there was a book that I was reading, and it sort of talks about a particular experiment that was being done. And it's really quite frightening to see the outcome of this experiment. This teacher walks into a classroom, and the classroom is filled with year 10 students. They draw a chalk dot on the blackboard and say, "What do you see?" And as you can appreciate, for year 10 students, they've developed a certain level of critical thought, and their critical thought is, that's a chalk dot. But this teacher then walked into a kindergarten room, did the same thing, chalk dot on the blackboard, and went, "What do you see?" And because kids are just so free thinking still, it was a very different response. They were getting a squashed bug, an owl's eye, all of these amazing creative responses. And this goes to exactly what you were just talking to, where we become accustomed to living in the expectations and this, certain pressure that is put on becoming something. And we, as part of that, we lose our authenticity. We lose that sort of creative flair there of all of these amazing ideas of what we could have had, because we're trying to get the right grade on that. We're trying to answer the test in a certain way. We're trying to make sure that we are staying at the classroom during this regimented time, as you say. We're creating these circumstances where we're actually limiting and suppressing those abilities for those interests, those passions, those, that natural who these kids are to really shine through. And so this is where some of these pillars that I work with the children and the parents around are really so critical, because it's coming back to, we need that education at school. There's a real importance to what that is. How can we create activities in the home environment, in, outside of school activities? How can we create activities that really instill that passion and those, spark those interests in kids, so that they're not only getting that amazing academic support from the school, but then they're also getting this additional support from being able to develop this resilience, the authenticity, and the entrepreneurial spirit. And by developing both sides of that, because kids not only need academic achievements to be able to succeed in life, they need this other part. So we need to focus on both, so that we can then actually set these kids up for that future success. They're then sparked at being able to come up with amazing career opportunities. They're sparked at being able to further study, they're further drive whichever key interests and hobbies and things that they've got. There's this then natural tendency to say, well, actually, instead of going on the device for watching YouTube for the next 30 minutes, I kind of want to go and play, whichever particular hobby it is, be it a sport, be it crafting, be it whatever. I kind of want to go and do that for 30 minutes instead. So the sooner that we can actually start sparking these things, the sooner it actually also helps to balance some of that technology just organically. There are so many different benefits that come from this particular work and the focus that we can bring there.
Have you read or heard about the NASA study to find geniuses?
No, I would love to know more.
So I'm definitely going to put the link in the description box below, because I'm going to butcher this because it's like a whole story. But basically, NASA was interested in finding like what makes a genius because they want geniuses working for them, right? Fair. They started in kindergarten and they did the test and everything. 96% of the kids were geniuses. Fast forward, I think it's like fifth grade or something like that. It was like 12% or something like that. And you fast forward all the way to end of high school, it's like 2%. There's a whole bunch of story in how they did it, but I just wanted to give those numbers and how going to your analogy of the teacher and the dot, how we can go from these geniuses to just people who are regimented in seeing just what it is. We don't necessarily see something that we do as bad. For example, let's go get some fast food. I'm hungry, right? We fixed one problem, but now we developed another problem. But we don't see the second problem actually. We can look in the mirror, we still don't see the problem. We can look at other people, we still won't see the problem. It's because we just don't have our critical thinking anymore. We just kind of have our surface level type of thinking. And even conversations, most of the conversations that people have every single day are surface level. Think of if you see someone, hey, how are you doing? Oh, I'm good. Cool. Right? If you have a conversation with a kindergartner or a first grader, they're out there. Imagination is crazy. You have a conversation with a high schooler. Yeah, how was your day? Yeah, so, it's whatever, right? It's very different how the minds move. Do you find a correlation with age and or the pillars affecting children, or is it more of that we just go through our developmental stages, and when we're 16 and we're teenagers, we are just like that? Because when I was a teacher and I taught middle school, you would get the sweetest kids, right, from elementary school, and the moment they go into middle school, you're tainted. All of those kids, they just taint them. And then they're like, now they're all rebels. And it's like, Jesus, no wonder why middle school is so tough. You got all these hormones raging, but then you also have a huge peer influence. And I think that is going to that fear of failure type of aspect, the entrepreneurial type of thing. And then also the unity, right? Where they will rather sacrifice being authentic to be accepted by the masses of people.
And wanting acceptance is a natural human thing. We all want to be part of something. We want to belong. And so it's not about saying that that's wrong, but how can they do that more authentically is kind of the work that I'm doing with them. And what I have found, and to go to your age bracket sort of question there, is that early childhood, so sort of that 0 to 7 kind of time frame, there's a lot of support out there for that early childhood development that happens. There's a lot of various different support resources. There's a lot of engagement that happens from the daycares. There's a lot of extra support that occurs during that early childhood phase. We then look at adolescence, and there's a lot of support for the unique development stage of adolescence. There's so many different programs to be able to help kids during that phase. There's a lot of focus around how can we support mental health during adolescence. There's a lot of work and a lot of unique programs to support the adolescents. There is very little that actually supports that middle childhood stage in between those two. And that is actually the critical part. This middle childhood stage of development is when kids are actually, their world is actually starting to expand out beyond the family. During early childhood, their family is their entire little world. They're driven by what the family is doing. It's all around that family engagement. They'll have their little friends, don't get me wrong, but it's being driven, and that connection is being really motivated by the family. During that middle childhood stage, though, this is when things start to expand. They start to look to engage with their friends more. They want to have more play dates. They want to be able to have that little bit more independence here and there. We see these things starting to grow and grow and grow and grow during that sort of 7 to 12 age bracket during middle childhood, where peers start to have more of an influence over that time frame. They start to want to develop more independence. They want to be expressing themselves a little bit more. They start to create their own identity in the world. And so what we are then seeing is that the kids who have those 3 pillars that are really strong. They've got this resiliency and that they can handle these challenges and bounce back. They have the authenticity. They know who they are. They understand how to be able to, recognize these emotions in their body. They're able to understand how they show up in the world, in essence, what's important to them and how do they really sort of show themselves and have that self-trust. And then they've got the entrepreneurial spirit where they can understand how to view failure and they've got that growth mindset, etc. The kids who have been able to develop these, they are so much better placed to start off adolescence. And now if we think of middle childhood where their world is starting to expand, this is the prime time to be able to start practicing all of these sorts of things. Being able to learn how to be more resilient. Start small and then keep growing and growing and growing. By the time they reach adolescence, then they've practiced this for however many years. They have a deeper understanding of who they are. But more than that, if we think of a muscle, going to the gym, go to the gym for 2 years, doing the same sort of muscle workouts versus not going to the gym for 2 years and try and go and do that workout. Who's going to be able to do the workout so much easier? Being able to start adolescence with these skills and then be able to continue practicing through adolescence, because that's an entire unique journey on its own. And there are various different sort of hormonal challenges and various different neurological challenges that are actually happening for kids during that adolescent stage of development. And that's why we do see such a shift. And as parents, we might think that it's pretty much a flip of a switch overnight. Where did that amazing middle childhood sort of kid go? Who is this now person living in the house? We might think it happened overnight, but there is an actual developmental shift that happens in their bodies. And so they then get to keep practicing these skills during adolescence, where they've still got that protection of the family. They still have that support. They've still got that guidance. So before they then start reaching adulthood, where they're really having to, tackle much bigger challenges and tackle things on their own without that same level of support, if they've gotten all of that time to practice and develop, they're even better placed to go into adulthood, because we need to think of it as this expanding level of complexity and this expanding challenges that we're facing. So the sooner that we can get these developmental skills with children, and there is very unique requirements between early childhood, middle childhood, and adolescence. So the sooner that we can bring these skills into our child's world, the better off they're going to be throughout that entire journey of life.
I know there's some parents who are thinking right now, I'm sure, well, I'm just going to homeschool my kids. I'm going to avoid all these problems and, having all this peer group interaction and having my kids indoctrinated, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, right? But what happens when you do that is you take away some of that resilience training that they're going to be getting when they are in school. Think of the bullying, trying to fit in, things like that. There is good stress and bad stress, as we said. But if you just do everything for them and you protect them, they're going to have a harder time later on, because you can't fight for their whole entire life. Like, that's just not how it works. They're going to have to fight their battles at some point. And when we fail to give them opportunities to learn and to adjust, this is when they can rebel. Maybe they run away, et cetera, et cetera. There could be a whole slew of issues that happen from keeping them closed off in a box. Is there a certain amount of freedom that we should be giving them, and then also setting limits that we should be giving them as parents? Because, as we're talking, it seems like freedom and allowing them to be pragmatic and to learn with the world is going to be an effective way for them to learn and develop. But yet, where is the cutoff for us to say, no, you're not going out with your friends tonight? No, you're not going to get a tattoo. I mean, what what
You're
is
not
the
allowed those
line?
5 piercings.
Exactly.
Yeah, I would say that every kid and every situation is going to be unique. So there's not one size fits all response to that. There will be a lot of it needing to be guided by what the children, like how they're developing, what they're showing you as a parent. And so as a parent, needing to be really aware and in tune with those insights that the kids are providing us. And I guess, how can we then actually approach it all so that they do start learning these skills? We want them to be able to start critically thinking for themselves. We want them to be making the decision to say, oh, it's a school night, I probably shouldn't go out until 9 p.m. tonight with my friends, and that maybe I should actually spend some time at home and head off to bed at 8:30 or whatever it is. We want them to actually start to understand how they are interacting with the world. So being able to start to coach them through learning, are you feeling tired right now? Is tonight the right night to be going out with your friends? If you're feeling really tired and exhausted, maybe we reschedule that to a different day. And you actually spend time looking after your body and resting tonight so that you can show up as your best self tomorrow. But it's around helping to coach and guide them through these moments. And that will start really young and it'll start really little. It's about being able to help them have choices in, would you like to do the dishes now or would you like to do them after dinner? Just little choices that we can start to bring in. They start to develop a sense of autonomy. They start to develop that independence, and they are starting to develop some thinking and that critical thinking for themselves. We start little and then we keep growing and expanding. And so it's then, as they keep growing up, bringing more of the open questions. And, think of yourself as a coach or a guide on the journey. So being able to bring questions to the table so that they can actually work through. And with that as well, role modeling. So if you have a challenging circumstance that is happening within the family unit, where appropriate, for some circumstances, actually sharing the problem-solving process that you're going through in being able to come to a solution. Kids are learning through what they're seeing around them. If they're seeing you work through things and you show up as your best self and you showing up with the resiliency and the authenticity and being able to demonstrate that perception of failure as a learning opportunity, for example, they are then more inclined to feel safety in doing that themselves, because that's what they're seeing as the norm in their world. If we can start to role model this as parents, if we can start to help provide that coaching and that guidance through both, sharing our own journeys of, how do we problem solve something? How did we perceive that particular failure? So it could be implementing a failure Fridays, over dinner on a Friday night, having a chat about one thing that you've all learned that week from a failure, bringing that acceptance to it, but being able to help them on that journey through that coaching. So when they do have a situation that arises at school, bullying, for example, instead of just wanting to run in and solve it for them, ask them questions, help them work through the critical thinking of the situation, help them actually come to outcomes that are going to work towards a resolution. It might be that you need to still step in there, but it's been a journey of helping them to work something out. So that not only is fostering their own independence and their sense of competency, but it's also then fostering that ability to be resilient and to, see that growth mindset come through, and authenticity as well, because they're having to come up with these ideas themselves based on what they think could be right. So it's actually really supporting to develop all of these things by just helping them on these journeys, helping them to understand through questioning, through coaching, being able to help the development of these real fundamentals by not necessarily jumping in as the problem solvers that we all want to be. None of us like seeing our kids in a challenging situation. We all want to help, but there is different ways that we can help. And as parents, we need to consider what's really going to be the best help that I can provide the child. Is it running in and solving the problem, or is it helping them to feel empowered to do so themselves?
I might be a little bit callous from all the coaching that I did with children and teaching, because if I see them struggle, I'm like, go through it. This is your fight here. And one of the reasons I know I do that is because when I started teaching, I had this grandiose dream of, being like this wonderful teacher, kind of like what was the movie with Robin Williams, Poet Society or something? I think it was called like Poet Society or something, where he was a teacher and he would go in to talk about literature, and he was able to get in with the students and teach them to love reading and learning. Yet today, everything is standardized testing. Here's a test. This is going to let us know where you are. Yet there's 15, 16-year-olds that don't even know how to read. We are going down a path now where we have like a triad situation. We have parents, the child, and then we have the school. And if we look at what the parents and the children are doing, we can look at that and we can bolster that up. And regardless of what the school is doing, you're going to be okay. There is a book, I'm not sure if you have dived into it. It's called Weapons of Mass Instruction, not destruction, instruction. And it was about a teacher. He was inner city. He taught 30 plus years, and he wrote the book of how schooling is actually destructive to most children in their education. Great book if you haven't read it. I'm waiting for Superman. It's another one to see how schools are affecting the mind and children's. If you're a teacher, I highly recommend that movie also. But we can just look at different scenarios that many people are in. You can be in a good district and maybe you have a very good public school. If you don't have the funds to do private schools, Montessori school, etc. If you don't, what's the option, right? If you're a busy parent, if you just have to allow the school to, take over as almost like a daycare, then now we have the issue. How can we start to look at that and begin to problem solve from there? Because the pillars that we have been talking about are wonderful, and every child should be looking at these three pillars, and every parent should be looking at these three pillars and implementing it into their daily lives, into all of their schooling, and all the way up until adulthood, because that's going to give them the foundation that they need. But yet, if they don't do that, I've seen it. By the time they reach high school, they are not equipped to handle what the world has for them. And this is when they're coming to my office because parents don't know what to do. The kids don't know what to do. It's almost like they're like, I tried everything. I did what I thought I needed to do, but they weren't told the things that they needed. They weren't told how to be resilient. They weren't told how to, be, these entrepreneurial type of spirits, and they weren't told how to be true to themselves. So now they are doing all the late work that they should have been doing. So it's like a catch-up game now. How can we instill this idea that we need to start today?
I think that's it. We need to start today. It's a full stop. It's we can't put this off as parents. The earlier that, like I was saying before, the earlier that we can instill some of these things in our kids, the better equipped they are to navigate some of the challenges that do start to come up into their world. But we need to start today. And a lot of parents go, well, where do I start? How do I start? That's a big question. And it comes back to, what one thing can you add, or one thing that you could change that is then actually going to take a step towards the outcome that you're needing? Let's not change everything at once. Let's just look at the first step. What is that first step on the journey? And, again, for a lot of parents, they then go, I just don't know. What is the first step? I don't know. And, this is where it then comes down to, okay, well, again, let's break it down. What's the one thing that we want to focus on? And, just keep sort of breaking it down and, look at help resources. There are so many amazing books. There is my own book as well that I will say that does also provide some strategies and tips on what is that first step? How can you step it through? But listen to a podcast, look to read a book, look at something to give you that inspiration on what is just one little thing, and just look for one small piece. So it might be the one dinner per week that you sit down on a failure Friday and you start exploring what are the failures for that week. It could be that we look at some of the simple activities. How can we bring one of those into the kids' life? It could be looking at their genius zone, talking to what you were saying before about that NASA study. One of the things that I actually do put in my book is, how can you actually start uncovering and identifying that genius zone for your child? What is that? for them. But it's really just kind of finding what's that first step. Let's not try to change everything at once. Let's just look for one step as a parent. And then once we've really got that down pat, what's the next step? Obviously, I work with parents and children and very happy for people to reach out to me. We can have a one-on-one call and actually start, having a bit of a chat about personal circumstances for each individual situation. But what is that one step is the thing that I would say to parents.
Yeah, and very true. And as you said, listening to podcasts, reading books can be a great first step. I know there's many blog articles from educators. I've had wonderful educators in early childhood also come on, talk about the work with huge followings too. And it's so interesting to just hear what we need to be doing and what we're doing. So it's like we're doing the opposite of what we should be doing. And it's almost like if we're supposed to be doing this, then why are we not? And it's our responsibility as parents and educators to make sure that our children are going to be in the best situation possible for them to develop properly and fully. Because if we miss some holes, in my high school cooperating teacher, he gave me this great saying. He goes, sometimes you can be doing everything that you need to do, but you sometimes a pothole can form, right? Think of if you're living in, this is America. If you're living in a place with like, real cold, like New Jersey, New York, the moment there's a little crack and it's winter, it snows, the ice is going to expand that crack. And before you know, you have a gaping pothole. That can be a big issue. It didn't have to be like that. We could have stopped it when it was that, that small crack in the road, but we waited. We don't have to wait now. We can take action today. If you're a parent, if you know someone who's a parent, and it doesn't even matter their age, it could be someone who's young, someone going through the middle stages of development, or someone just leaving, the teenage years and getting ready for the real world. They need to be looking at, are they ready? And if they're not ready, how can they get ready? And I think what we talked about today is going to be a great first step for them to reach out to you, Aliesha, to learn more about, all right, are we equipped? Are we ready? And if we're not, let's get equipped. All right. Like if we look at like the movies, like when they're about to fight like the boss or the bad guy or something, like, like the thriller action movies, they get equipped. They're like, okay, I'm ready for this final scene. They're not just going in there, with an umbrella and saying, okay, like, let's hope everything works out. It's going to be rainy days. We have to be ready. And sometimes an umbrella is not enough. Sometimes we need a whole gazebo to make sure we don't get wet. There's going to be hurricanes, there could be storms, there could be trials and tribulations every single day, but it doesn't mean we can't take action. And I loved our conversation. And it's an important conversation because the children are our future. If you think about it, they're the next leaders, right? I know you spoke with Antoine. His whole mission is the next leaders of the world. He understands that. Many educators understand that, but sometimes it's like we are handcuffed, especially teachers, they're handcuffed to the curriculum, to what they have to do versus what they know the kid needs, because it's no longer looking at the student. This is what you need. It's more of what does the class need in general. And this is why I love coaching so much, because we can look at you individually, your situation, the parent, the child, and then we can come up with a plan that's going to work for you. There's no cookie cutter approach to this. This is what you need in order to be successful. So as we begin to wrap up, I would love to get some final words from you and then for you to tell the audience where they can find you.
Thank you. Look, I think we've covered so much in our conversation today. And what I would say as the final sort of takeaway message for a lot of the people who are listening is there's no wrong time to be starting to take action in this space. It could be teenage years, it could be adulthood. As adults even, we are all still learning and developing and evolving. And that's what's fantastic. We need to keep being on that learning journey for our entire life. It's being able to just understand there's no wrong time to start, and starting today is perfect. So what is that one thing that you can do today to start progressing towards your future and, to start developing these things? And remembering that the only person that you should compare yourself to is the person that you were yesterday. No one else. Only the person you were yesterday. Those are probably the key things that I would be wanting people to take away from the conversation. You can find me on saplingminds.com.au. is my website, also on the various social media channels. On my website, I do have my book available for sale. It was a bestseller from seed to sapling. So it's fantastic. It's a book for parents around being able to understand these three pillars that are so crucial in today's life, and being able to understand why is it important and what are some of the steps that they could take to transform the landscape of the lifestyle that their child is living. And also on my website, there is that opportunity to book that one-on-one phone call that I was sort of talking about before, where we can just dive in and have a bit of a chat around what are the circumstances at play. So I'd love to connect with anyone who's listening and would like to explore this conversation further.
Perfect. And I'm going to make it easy for everyone. So don't worry about spelling or doing anything too difficult. The link is going to be in the description box below. So check Aliesha out, check out her website, sign up for a consultation. Whether you have children or if you know someone who does, send this information their way. Because when we're trying to make a difference in the world, it can be a person at a time. It doesn't have to be a whole group and you try to get everyone to follow you. It could just be one person starts to walk and then another person, then before you know, you have a long line of people. But the reason that happened was because you initiated it. You were the leader. And in our world today, we have to develop our leadership skills and not be afraid to walk away from the masses and the crowds. We have to be true to our authentic self too, as parents and as adults, and make sure that our kids can have these three fundamental pillars in their life from the start rather than having to repair them later on in life. I always say it is easier to make sure a child is not broken than to heal a broken adult. And we don't have to go through this process of always healing when we're 18, 19, 20. We can just at 18, 19, and 20 send them off to the world and they're already winning. And that is what I want to see for the future. And if you need help, like I said, check out the description box below and you'll find all the answers that you need to. Thank you so much, Aliesha, for coming on, spending some time and talking about your work.